So how to use antes and después, before and after in Spanish, because it's not just as simple as just throwing the word in the sentences, unfortunately. So we're going to figure out how to use it properly in this episode. Welcome to the Michael Harper Spanish podcast, where if you don't learn any Spanish, you weren't listening well enough. I was able to learn Spanish within a few months, and now I want to help you do the same. Spanish does not have to take years to learn. It can be done within a matter of months with the proper roadmap and the proper practice. This podcast is made to be a resource for you to help you learn Spanish quicker and understand complex Spanish topics. We'll be discussing various Spanish tips that I use to help me learn Spanish within a few months, various topics, vocabulary words, grammar rules, verb conjugations, and even conversations and interviews with native Spanish speakers. To see more content from me and to learn more Spanish, be sure to check out www.michaelharperspanish.com and follow me on Instagram at michaelharperspanish. All right, so first of all, the words antes y después. For some reason, it took me like a long time to remember these words and commit them to memory. I would oftentimes get them confused a lot, and a lot of my students have told me the same thing, that for some reason they just get these words confused. Remember that A comes before D, so antes is before, and then después is that starts with a D, so it comes after. And there are three ways that we're going to look at to use this word. So depending on how you use it, it can vary. Now, there are three ways. One is just using the word antes and después in a sentence. The other way is to say either antes de or después de, that de word. And the third way is to say antes or después de que. So we're adding the que word after the de. Those are the three ways you're going to be able to use it. And yes, it depends on the situation and what you're trying to say. That will trigger one of these three different ways of saying antes or después. Now, let's look at antes and después just in general. You're only going to use these words without anything else attached if you're at the end of a sentence. For example, if I were to say, I want to go before, it would be quiero ir antes. If you were to say, I want to go after, it would be quiero ir después. We don't add the de, we don't add the de que after it. Now, when do we say de, though? The antes or después de. We're going to use this, number one, when we're just saying it at the beginning and we're using a noun afterwards. For example, before the party, basically when any noun follows the word before and after, we're going to say antes or después de. So before the party would be antes de la fiesta. After the party would be después de la fiesta. If we were to say something like after class, it would be después de clase. And if you're already figured out how to say before class, it would be antes de clase. You're also going to use antes or después de when you're trying to say a verb after, before, and after, but it's conjugated in this way, where you would say before eating, after eating, the ing, after or before doing. Any verb that is conjugated in English with the ing, we're going to use it in this way. So if I wanted to say after eating, I would say después de comer. I would not conjugate the verb comer. Even though it's technically conjugated in English, we're going to leave it in its unconjugated form in Spanish. So it would be después de comer or antes de comer. Another example would be, let's say I wanted to say, before you call, let's eat. It would be antes de llamar, before calling, antes de llamar, vamos a comer. If I were to say, hey, after eating, let's call, it would be después de comer, vamos a llamar. So whenever you are having a verb following the word antes or después, and it ends in ing in English, you're not going to conjugate it in Spanish, and you're going to say antes or después de. It's a little confusing, but just stick with me till the end here. So the other way is to say antes or después de que. Of that, or of what, basically. Now, this is used when you have a verb that's conjugated in English, when you're conjugating with the subject. For example, after you eat. We're saying after you eat, not after eating. After eating would be después de comer. After you eat is what we're talking about here. So whenever we have something conjugated in English like that, we're going to say después de que, and then the next way we conjugate is actually going to be in the subjunctive tense. Now, don't worry about the subjunctive tense. The subjunctive is basically another tense that is triggered when you say certain phrases. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. So in this case, instead of it being después de que comes, to say after you eat, it would be después de que comas, with an A instead of an E. That's how you conjugate in the subjunctive in this instance. Before you eat would be antes de que comas. So basically just remember the format to where it's antes and después de que. The next verb that follows is going to be conjugated in the subjunctive present tense. Now, again, don't worry about the subjunctive tense. It's just another tense that we have in Spanish that is really triggered depending on when we say certain phrases. It's something that I recommend learning and worrying about once you've learned all the other verb tenses. So worst case, in the beginning, I want you to just conjugate regularly. Now, if you're saying antes or después de que, it's not technically right, but people are going to be able to understand you perfectly. It's not a huge deal. If you're looking for a more detailed explanation of all the verb tenses and how to master them, I would encourage you to check out my Master Spanish Verbs in 90 Days program. You can check that out by going to michaelharperspanish.com and clicking on the Master Spanish Verbs program tab where it says Learn More, and you can learn more about signing up for this. So there you have it. These are all the different ways that you could use antes and después. I really don't want you to feel overwhelmed with this. I know that it seems like a lot of different ways to use it, and it can sound and feel confusing. Here's the key, though. It's important that you do not try and study this, okay, but rather you practice this. The only way, and I repeat this, the only way that you can learn these things is by using your own examples. So don't rely on my examples. Go make your own and speak them out loud. Studying these and just trying to figure it out that way is not going to get you to understand these. You have to practice. Speaking of practice, let's do a little practice session right now. So I want you to write down on a piece of paper if you can. If you have a piece of paper, if not, try to do this in your head. The 3 different ways to use antes or después. Now, obviously we have antes and después just alone. We have antes de or después de with the de there. And then the third way is to say the de que after one of these 2 words. Now, I'm going to say a sentence in English, and I want you to figure out how you would say the antes or the después part in Spanish. Which one of these 3 ways would you use? And you can even try to conjugate it if you'd like. So, here we go. Before doing my homework, I want to eat. Before doing my homework, I want to eat. So remember, we have before. So obviously we know that this is antes because A comes before D. Now, which combination do we use? So since I said before doing with the ing, it's going to be antes de, and it's important not to conjugate this verb. Antes de hacer. Antes de hacer mi tarea would be before doing my homework. All right, let's try another example. Okay. Before playing video games, I need to do my homework. Before playing video games, I need to do my homework. This would be the same thing. Antes de jugar videojuegos is before playing video games. What if I were to say before you play video games? Let's actually do after you play video games because we've been using antes a lot. So after is después. D comes after A, so we're using después. So after you play, since it's you play, and we're conjugating this in English with the subject there, it's going to be después de que tú juegues. Okay, juegues is jugar, conjugated for you in the subjunctive present tense. Again, don't worry about the subjunctive tense. Don't freak out about it right now. You'll get it with time, I promise. What if I were to say, I want to play video games after or afterwards? There's not really a word for afterwards, by the way. It's just after. So I want to play after. This would just be quiero jugar después with nothing attached because we have after going at the end of our thought, at the end of our sentence. Okay. I hope that that little practice session helped you figure it out more, because for me, listing down the rules and the different ways to use this stuff just typically confuses me. I was confusing myself in the beginning trying to explain all of these things. But when I sit there and look at examples and practical, real ways of using this, it actually helps me understand it a lot more. So I hope that this helps you a lot. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out at hello@michaelharperspanish.com, or you can shoot me a direct message on Instagram. And that's all for today's episode. Be sure to subscribe, whether you're listening on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple, and I will see you in the next one.